Where we stayed was quiet. It was an unworldly experience, especially around nighttime, or at least, that's how nostalgia bends my memory. At first sight though, it just looked like a trashy neighborhood for the poor. There was a basketball court that was barely ever used for what it was meant for. Back alleys and walkways were all bestrewn with litter because dumpsters and trash cans were overfilled. But we looked past all of that, and when you could, you'd understand why it was so special to us. We spent a lot of time looking up at the pale moon, big and bright, high up in the starry sky. We'd lose ourselves, the silence delivering us to the endless mystical darkness, the twinkling lights. The boys and I would meet up every night at around 8 to 9 p.m. That was when the noise and activities of the residents would begin to simmer down. The five of us would walk around, hang around, adoring the ethereal beauty of the night. Towards the end of our get-together, that was when we would sit down and chat between the many long intervals of utter quiet. One night, Levi went missing. He was the only one who didn't stay in our neighborhood, and so anything could have happened to him on his way back home. We said our goodbyes that night, as we usually did, sending Levi off the long road that would eventually cross beneath an underpass, and then he walked off, and we never saw him again. 2 days later, the rumor started. People said that he ran away because his mother was negligent, or that he went to live with his long-distance girlfriend, or that he was kidnapped or murdered. Firstly, his mother was the most gentle lady. Secondly, we knew his long-distance girlfriend, and she knew nothing. We couldn't deny the possibility that he was kidnapped or murdered, though we always had the feeling that there was something more to his disappearance. Something about it all smelled awfully freaky. Every time we wanted to talk about it, we couldn't find the words. The police never turned up with any good news about him. We never found any clues, no traces, nothing. He simply vanished. 10 months in, call us terrible friends, but we threw in the towel. The endless searching drained us. We were chasing our own tails. It depressed us. Levi himself would have told us to stop and go back to what we always did, just without him. And that's exactly what we did. We went back to loitering around at night, but this time, we kept our eyes open for any dodgy happenings. If we saw a stranger, we'd stare him down until he left or went into his home. If we heard a noise, we'd go searching for where it came from. We were like the neighborhood's night watch. 2 months later, at 12 a.m. on a Thursday, just as we were about to head back home, we found this old guy lying unconscious in the middle of the street, balding, scraggly beard, face chased with wrinkles and cuts. This was just the kind of dodgy situation we were looking out for, but we couldn't even begin to understand what was going on. Thinking he was dead, we approached the body until we were close enough to see he was still moving and breathing. I was the one who hunkered down and tapped his shoulder, saying, "Hey Grandpa, are you okay?" And I was repeating myself like this for a minute or so. He finally just opened his eyes, 2 ugly slits, and he slurred, "What happened?" as if woken up after a long night of partying and now hung over. I stood up and the guy put some force into lifting himself off the ground and sitting up. Maybe it was to do with the lighting, but now we could all see that the old guy had been battered and bruised worse than we thought. He had a black eye, almost swollen shut, blotches of dried blood everywhere, making his white beard mostly red. My friends and I started whispering amongst ourselves, saying things along the lines of, maybe he's just drunk, or call the ambulance, he's not in a good shape. But then we didn't feel the urgency to call for any professional help. He didn't seem to be in need of it, despite how he looked. The old guy was seated still on the ground, looking up at us, knees up to his chest. Over time, he started screwing up his face, either in an expression of pain or confusion, and he said, "Who am I? Where am I? What's going on?" And over time, he started freaking out, shivering, panic building up. At this point, as scared as we were, we also felt sorry for the old guy. Is he suffering from dementia or something? This was just sad. A friend and I grabbed him by either elbow for support, and we led him over to sit him down on a bench under a flickering streetlight near the white fence encompassing the basketball court. The guy stank, all kinds of stink. Sweat, mildew, even traces of putrefaction and rotten fish. No average teenager like myself could be an expert in dealing with the needy elderlies, but we were trying our best. And I was telling the old guy, "Calm down, Grandpa. Relax and just try your best to remember what happened, alright?" And so he tried his best to calm down. He slowed down, took deeper breaths, and then he shut his eyes. And then a moment of pin-drop silence followed for a minute or a half. Eventually, you could see his eyeballs start flickering around behind his closed eyelids as if receiving an overload of information. Too much to process. All of a sudden, he shut his eyes wide open and let out a loud moan of pain and agony, and this threw us all back a step on our heels. Now we were freaking out. One of us, his name's Mason, was a short kid, always wearing oversized baggy clothes, mostly yellow, and wore a big beanie which made his head look smaller than it already was. Mason fumbled his hand deep down into his pocket and scrabbled to take his phone out, and in a panic, he said, "I'm calling the cops right now. This guy is crazy." Another friend, his name was Jackson, dark-skinned, physically well-built for his age, didn't look like he should have been hanging out with us losers, but he did. Jackson held Mason's arm to stop him from calling the police, and he told Mason, "Hold on, we can sort this out ourselves. If it gets out of hand, that's when we call the cops." The old guy stopped moaning and just shivered, swaddling himself in his large coat and crying. Jackson was all composed, always is. He was the leader of the group, always thinking rationally, always focused. He stepped up to the old man and asked him, "We don't have to get the cops involved, right? They've got a lot more important things to attend to. This is something we can handle ourselves, right?" The old man hesitated and then nodded his head. Then he frowned, as if pulling out something deep from his memory. "Cops, you mean the police? Cars with the red flash, the blue flashes, the sirens?" "That's it," Jackson confirmed. "Red flash, blue flash, white cars, sirens. See, your memory's already coming back. It's going to be alright. Soon, we'll get you to where you need to be." The old guy looked down and back up again. "I need to take a walk. I think that'll help." "By all means," Jackson said, stretching one arm out to the road. "Will you all follow?" the old man inquired, seemingly more calmed down, to which Jackson looked back to the three of us and we all nodded. For a while, the old man hesitated, but finally stood up and began walking. We followed him, always at least 10 steps behind him. This happened 10 years ago, and it's easily the most daunting, strangest thing I'd ever been involved in, because as we were following Grandpa on his walk, I was starting to think the guy is absolutely nuts. Had the worst form of dementia, probably. He was bonkers, nutty as a fruitcake. He was shivering, scratching the back of his head, saying disjointed words like chattering teeth, white pearls and red. And he'd turn back to us and get up close to any one of us and say, won't stop screaming, scratching their eyes out, biting on tongues, vomit bits of flesh, pulling the skin off. All the while, Mason was getting closer and closer to calling the police, but Jackson, Mr. Big, was all composed and thought he was handling the situation. So we all just followed the mad, jittery old man, and we were all shaking in our shoes, except for Jackson, of course. The old man had a lot of stamina. For the bashed up state he was in, plus his age, it was actually impressive. We walked onto the long empty road where we used to send Levi off, and we still kept going. We ventured further and further away from our homes, our comfort zones, and then we finally ended up at the underpass. Grandpa couldn't go any further, more so than physically. He mentally couldn't get past this point. Something was stopping him, an invisible wall. He was frozen, terrified, wide eyes fixed onto the dark tunnel. Jackson walked up beside Grandpa and asked him what's wrong. Horrified and still looking into the gloomy, graffiti-infested underpass, the old man was a normal person all of a sudden, not a crazy guy anymore. He said, "This is where I went missing." This was the underpass Levi always took to get back home. He lived a 15-minute walk away and only came down here to hang out with us. Plus, he really liked our place, so he'd always looked forward to coming down. Levi did, however, mention how suspicious this underpass is. These two things were on our minds at that moment, Levi and the underpass. Two jigsaw pieces that shouldn't be fixed together because it defied the logic. The gears in our brains kept turning and turning. The last we saw of Levi, he was heading towards the underpass, and this was where the old man said he went missing. Jackson looked at the old man, studied his face, his eyes, his nose. Jackson peered at him, and then Grandpa turned towards Jackson with a 1,000-yard stare. Right then, the two of them realized something the rest of us would have taken forever to figure out. How could we? It defied logic. Jackson staggered closer towards the old guy and said, "Levi, is that you?" Grandpa squeezed his forehead, said Jackson's name, and then he stared each one of us down and said our names accordingly. Until the day our old friend took his final breath 5 years later, only we and his mother knew and actually believed Levi came back. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I am Tal Hafizullah, writer, narrator, and studio rat, as well as a liminal space and PS1 revival enthusiast. Through Embelite, I aim to deliver animated stories imbued with sleepy, dreamy, liminal space vibes that evoke introspection and nostalgia. If this sounds right down your alley, consider subscribing. Also, leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it, and click the notification bell so that you don't miss any of my uploads. Find me on Patreon, Instagram, and more. Links are in the description. See you around, fellow liminal spacers.